Domestic Tampering, The Illuminati Creates Racial Tension in the book A Racial Program for the 20th Century, published in 1913 by Israel Cohen of the Fabian Society, a follow-up to Zangwill's Melting Pot. He wrote, "We must realize that our party's most powerful weapon is racial tension. By propounding into the consciousness of the dark races, that for centuries have been oppressed by the whites, we can mold them to the program of the Communist Party. In America, we will aim for subtle victory. While inflaming the Negro minority against the whites, we will instill in the whites a guilt complex for the exploitation of the Negroes. We will aid the Negroes to rise to prominence in every walk of life, in the professions, and in the world of sports and entertainment. With this prestige, the Negroes will be able to intermarry with the whites, and begin a process which will deliver America to our cause." On June 17, 1957, this passage was read into the congressional record by Representative Thomas G. Abernathy. In 1922, the Russian Comintern provided $300,000 for the spreading of communist propaganda among Negroes. In 1925, the Communist Party, USA, told its members, "The aim of our party and our work among the Negro masses is to create a powerful proletarian movement which will fight and lead the struggle of the Negro race against the exploitation and oppression in every form, and which will be a militant part of the revolutionary movement of the whole American working class and connect them with the struggles of national minorities and colonial peoples of all the world, and thereby the cause of world revolution and the dictatorship of the proletariat." In 1925, a dozen blacks were recruited for propaganda training in Russia. That same year, the American Negro Labor Congress was established. In 1930, they changed their name to the League of Struggle for Negro Rights. They merged with the United Negro Congress when it was founded in 1936, in Washington, D.C. By 1940, communists made up 2/3 of its membership. In 1947, they united with the Civil Rights Congress, a communist front group. In a 1928 pamphlet by John Pepper, alias for Joseph Pogany, called American Negro Problems, a move was being made by Stalin to ferment revolution and stir the blacks into creating a separate republic for the Negro. Another pamphlet put out by the New York Communist Party in 1935, called The Negroes in a Soviet America, urged the blacks to rise up and form a Soviet state in the South by applying for admission to the Comintern. It contained a firm pledge that a revolt would be supported by all American communists and liberals. On page 48, it said that the Soviet government would give the blacks more benefits than they would give to the whites, and any act of discrimination or prejudice against the Negro would become a crime under the revolutionary law. In the Communist Party, a manual on organization by J. Peters, he writes, "The other important ally of the American proletariat is their mass of 13 million Negro people in their struggle against national oppression. The Communist Party, as the revolutionary party of the proletariat, is the only party which is courageously and resolutely carrying on a struggle against the double exploitation and national oppression of the Negro people, becoming intense with the developing crisis, can win over the great masses of the Negro people as allies of the proletariat against the American bourgeoisie." In James Cannon's America's Road to Socialism, he says that the Negroes will play a great and decisive role in the revolution. And why shouldn't they be? They have nothing to lose but their property and discrimination, and a whole world of prosperity, freedom, and equality to gain. You can bet your boots the Negro will join the revolution to fight for that once it becomes clear to them that it cannot be gained except by revolution." The former FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, said of the communist goals, "Communists seek to advance the cause of communism by injecting themselves into racial situations and in exploiting them. 1. To intensify the frictions between Negroes and whites to prove that discrimination against the minorities is an inherent defect of the capitalistic system. 2. To foster domestic disunity by dividing Negroes and whites into antagonistic, warring factions. 3. To undermine and destroy established authority. 4. To incite racial strife and riotous activity. And 6. To portray the communist movement as the champion of social protest and the only force capable of ameliorating the conditions of the Negro and the oppressed." In light of all this, you can see why the Supreme Court, under elitist Earl Warren, issued the desegregation law in 1954, and why Eisenhower and Kennedy enforced it by using federal troops. It was to create more tension between blacks and whites. Incidentally, it was the Warren Court who prohibited prayer and the singing of Christmas carols in the schools. This was intended to weaken Christianity. Jacob Schiff, the Rothschilds' man in America, decided that the best way to create racial tension was to establish leadership among the blacks. In 1909, he laid out plans for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. It was the merging of the communist-controlled Niagara movement, a group of blacks led by W. E. B. Du Bois, and a group of white social activists. In the beginning, the top leaders of the NAACP were a group of Jews appointed by Schiff. Their goal was to fight segregation and discrimination. They are the largest black organization in the country, with well over 1,500 chapters, and about 500,000 members. Communist Party members were told to join the NAACP in order to infiltrate them. The Communist Party platform stated, "The Negro race must understand that capitalism means racial oppression, and communism means social and racial equality." Manning Johnson, who held the highest position a black could have in the Communist Party, said in his 1958 book Color, Communism, and Common Sense, that he quit because he felt Russia was attempting to involve them in a bloody revolution where as many as 5 million blacks would die. Another Negro communist, Leonard Patterson, testified on November 18, 1950, "I left the Communist Party because I became convinced that the Communist Party was only interested in promoting among the Negro people a national liberational movement that would aid the Communist Party in its efforts to create a proletarian revolution in the United States that would overthrow the government by force and violence through bloody full-time revolution, and substitute it with a Soviet form of government with a dictatorship of the proletariat." The May 1968 issue of Political Affairs, The Voice of the Communist Party, wrote after the death of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., "The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., the voice, inspiration and symbol of the Negro people's struggle for freedom and equality, is dead. The man who, more than anyone else, personified the heroic determination of the black people to win their liberation now, one of humanity's great leaders, has been silenced forever. We must see that his memory not be desecrated. We must not fail to do all in our power to realize the dream for which he died." King, the most powerful black leader in the country, was a pawn of the Illuminati. He supported North Vietnam during the war, and was photographed in 1957 at the Highlander Folk School, a communist training school in Tennessee, with Abner Berry, who held a post on the Central Committee of the Communist Party. The Joint Legislative Committee on Un-American Activities reported that his Southern Christian Leadership Conference was substantially under the control of the Communist Party through the influence of the Southern Conference Educational Fund and the communists who manage it. King had connections with over 60 Communist Front organizations. 9 of his closest aides were high-ranking communist activists, and one of those later became an aide to Reverend Jesse Jackson. Stanley Levison, who had been a King advisor since 1956, had been involved with the Communist Party up to 1955, and brought other known communists onto King's staff. Reverend Uriah J. Fields, King's secretary during the early years, wrote about him, "King helps to advance communism. He is surrounded with communists. This is the major reason I severed my relationship with him during the 50s. He is soft on communism." Carl Prussian, an FBI agent who infiltrated the Communist Party, and for 5 years attended meetings in California, testified in 1963, "I further swear and attest that at each and every one of the aforementioned meetings, one Reverend Martin Luther King was always set forth as the individual to whom communists should look and rally around in the communist struggle on many racial issues." Julia Brown, a former communist, said, "We were told to promote Martin Luther King to unite Negroes and also whites behind him. He was taking directions from communists. I know for a fact the communists would never have promoted him, financed him, and supported him if they couldn't trust him. I am certain as I can be that he knew what he was doing." Although a 1977 court order sealed the FBI's extensive surveillance records on King in the National Archives for 50 years, a book by Senator Jesse Helms in 1998 called The King Holiday and Its Meaning said that Charles D. Brennan, an assistant director of the FBI who was personally involved in the surveillance, characterized his activities as orgiastic and adulterous escapades, in which he could be bestial in his sexual abuse of women. He also observed that King frequently drank to excess. The 1981 book by David Garrow, called The FBI and Martin Luther King Jr. told of King's liaisons with prostitutes and the misappropriation of Southern Christian Leadership Conference funds. The FBI investigation had led J. Edgar Hoover to say that King is a tomcat with obsessive degenerate sexual urges, and President Lyndon Johnson to call him a hypocrite preacher. The oldest Jewish service organization, known as the B'nai B'rith, which means Son of the Covenant, was a secret Masonic order founded by 12 wealthy American Jews in New York in 1843. In 1913, Schiff, along with Chicago author and attorney Sigmund Livingston, reorganized the group, and established the Anti-Defamation League of the B'nai B'rith, ADL, to fight anti-Semitism and religious prejudice. They have been used as an instrument to convince people that an attack on the Rothschild and the Illuminati is a direct attack on the Jewish people. They are the most powerful Jewish organization in the world, with chapters in 44 countries. In the United States, they have over 2,000 agencies, about 25 regional offices, and a membership of 500,000. Its leaders had controlled the NAACP, the Urban League, and other black organizations, and often worked closely with the ACLU. Their influence on advertising with some major department stores, hotel chains, and major corporations, has been able to slant the media toward blacks. Nearly half of their annual budget comes through donations from non-Jews. The American League to Limit Armaments was established on December 18, 1914, a spin-off of the Emergency Peace Federation, led by communist Louis Lochner. The League was organized by Jane Addams, John Haynes Holmes, George Foster Peabody, Stephen Wise, L. Hollingsworth Wood, and Morris Hill Keat, all communists and socialists. In 1915, they changed their name to the American Union Against Militarism, establishing a Civil Liberties Bureau to oppose draft laws. The director of the bureau, socialist Roger Baldwin, reorganized it into the National Civil Liberties Bureau, and in 1920, with the help of Jane Addams, Clarence Darrow, Norman Thomas, Felix Frankfurter, and Arthur Garfield Hayes, founded the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU. Their goal was to fight for the rights of man, as set forth in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The original National Committee of the ACLU included Elizabeth Gurley Flynn and William Z. Foster, who both later became chairman of the Communist Party, Communist Scott Nearing, and Norman Thomas, Socialist Party chairman. Since the 1920s, 80% of its National Committee members had communist connections. In 1935, Baldwin said, "I am for socialism, disarmament, and ultimately for abolishing the state itself as an instrument of violence and compulsion. I seek the social ownership of property, the abolition of the propertied class and social control of those who produce wealth. Communism is the goal." In 1920, a joint committee of the New York State Legislature reported that the ACLU in the last analysis is a supporter of all subversive movements, and its propaganda is detrimental to the interests of the state. It attempts not only to protect crime, but to encourage attacks upon our institutions in every form. A September 1923 report by the United Mine Workers of America said that the group is working in harmony and unity with the communist superstructure in America, conducting a nationwide campaign for the liberation of Bolshevik agents and disloyal agitators who have been convicted under the wartime laws or the syndicalist laws of different states for unpatriotic or revolutionary activities. A January 1931 report by the Special House Committee to investigate communist activities in the United States said, "The American Civil Liberties Union is closely affiliated with the communist movement in the United States. It is quite apparent that the main function of the ACLU is to attempt to protect communists in their advocacy of force and violence to overthrow the government." The California Fact-Finding Committee on Un-American Activities reported in 1943, "The American Civil Liberties Union may be definitely classed as a communist front." Dr. J.B. Matthews, chief investigator for the House Special Committee on Un-American Activities, said in January 1955, "In 37 years of history of the communist movement in the United States, the Communist Party has never been able to do as much for itself as the American Civil Liberties Union has done for it." The ACLU is made up of about 200,000 members, with an army of 3,000 unpaid volunteer attorneys, and chapters in 47 states. They are a finger organization of the Illuminati, and are most noted for their cases involving the separation of church and state. They have defended the rights of Jehovah's Witnesses to refrain from saluting the flag, and to protect the rights of the Nazis and KKK to organize and speak freely. They have become the most powerful weapon against the church, and Christian tradition, in this country. The Electoral College, another contributing factor to Wilson's election to the presidency, and how the Illuminati controls the American electorate today, is accomplished through a process known as the Electoral College. Because delegates to the Constitutional Convention, which met in Philadelphia in 1787, thought that the general public lacked the insight and the judgment necessary to elect a president, and could be easily misled by irresponsible candidates, they enacted the Electoral College to do the job. The president and vice president are the only public officials in the country who are not elected through a direct vote of the people. Each party, in every state, has a slate of electoral candidates, based on the number of representatives it has in Congress. They are known as the Electoral College. Presently, there are 100 senators and 435 representatives in the United States, for a total of 538, includes 3 votes from the District of Columbia, electoral votes. The electors of the party receiving the highest vote are elected and meet on the first Monday, after the second Wednesday in December, to vote for their party's nominees. Even though the members of the Electoral College are pledged to vote for the presidential candidate of their party, they are not constitutionally bound to do so, and can change their mind at any time. Technically, however, a candidate wins all of the state's electoral votes, if he wins a majority of the popular votes. If a presidential candidate has the largest popular vote, but doesn't obtain the necessary electoral votes, he doesn't win the presidency. This happened in 1824, 1876, 1888, and 2000. If no candidate has a majority, then the House of Representatives chooses a president from the 3 highest candidates, with all the representatives from each state combining to cast 1 vote for each state. If a vice presidential candidate receives no clear majority, then the Senate chooses from the top 2, with each senator casting an individual vote. Therefore, the candidate's objective is not to win a majority of the popular vote, but a majority of the electoral votes, which is 270. Thus, if a candidate could be guaranteed just 11 states, leaving 267 remaining electoral votes in 39 states, and the District of Columbia, he could be guaranteed the presidency. California, 55, Texas, 34, New York, 31, Florida, 27, Pennsylvania, 21, Illinois, 21, Ohio, 20, Michigan, 17, New Jersey, 15, Georgia, 15, and North Carolina, 15. Combined, these states have 271 electoral votes. That is why you see a concentration of effort in these states at election time. With the Illuminati controlling the media in these large population centers, it is not a difficult task to alter public opinion and sway votes to the candidate they choose. With these states in line, the rest of the country generally follows. The bottom line is that the people's right to choose a president has practically been taken away, and without the financial resources necessary to fight it, there is very little that can be done.